At first glance, she had it all: a successful family, wealth, and stability. But one mistake in the virtual world opened the door to a series of events that turned her life upside down. What made her risk everything? Lived a family that seemed to reside in a perfect world. Michael and Anna, successful entrepreneurs, had built not only brilliant careers but also a strong family. Their home, surrounded by a lush, well-kept garden, was spacious, bright, and filled with warm colors. The white facade of the house, adorned with flower pots, welcomed guests, while the wide terrace with wooden furniture was a favorite spot for family tea parties. Every corner of the garden breathed Anna's care. Flower beds with colorful blooms, perfectly trimmed bushes, and a small playground with swings where the children loved to play. Michael was a man of his word in action. His daily schedule was meticulously planned: calls with partners, business meetings, managing a team of several dozen employees. Despite his busy workday, Michael always made time for his children. Every morning before leaving the house, he would visit the kids' rooms to wish them a good morning. With Leo, he engaged in small puzzle games, helping his son start the day with a smile. With Sophia, they loved discussing her latest drawings, while Arthur would receive questions about school, with Michael showing genuine interest in not just grades but also his interests and dreams. These moments were brief but meaningful, and Michael considered them an essential part of his day. Michael started his morning with a cup of strong coffee, which he drank at the oak table in the kitchen. By this time, Anna was already preparing breakfast for the children, while Michael checked his daily tasks. He tried not to get distracted but always found a moment to exchange a few words with Arthur, who often asked questions about business. "Dad, why did you choose this project?" the boy would ask, peering into his father's laptop with curiosity. Michael would smile and patiently explain, "Son, every project is an opportunity to create something new and help others." In the evenings after work, Michael always tried to spend time with the kids. He played with Leo, helped Sophia assemble puzzles, and discussed Arthur's school achievements. Michael believed that family bonds were built not on words but on actions, and he strived to show his children how important it was to be present. Anna, on the other hand, spent more time at home. Her days were filled with caring for the children, whom she was incredibly proud of. She started her mornings by preparing breakfast, her way of showing love: fluffy pancakes with berries for Leo, toast with chocolate spread for Sophia, and healthy oatmeal with fruit for Arthur. Everything was made with each child's preferences in mind. Breakfast was a time when the family gathered together, and Anna especially cherished these moments. After breakfast, she engaged in developmental games with Leo. Together they assembled puzzles, painted, or read books. 8-year-old Sophia adored drawing. Anna often sat beside her, praising her work and helping her develop her imagination. "Mom, I want to draw our house," Sophia would say, pulling out her sketchbook. "That's a great idea, sweetheart. You can draw our garden and swings, and I'll help with the flowers," Anna would reply with a smile. Elder Arthur, who already considered himself an adult, spent more time at school or with friends, but Anna always tried to connect with him. She knew that teenage years were a time of doubts and inner exploration. Sometimes she and Arthur would sit on the terrace and discuss everything that was on his mind. "Mom, how do you know if you're making the right choice?" he'd ask. Anna would answer, "The main thing is to listen to your heart and remember that every mistake is a lesson." Anna and Michael's home was not just a building. It was a living organism, where every corner was filled with warmth and coziness. Evenings in the family were particularly touching. After dinner, which Anna prepared with love, everyone gathered in the living room. Michael read stories to the children, while Anna knitted in her favorite chair. Leo would cozy up on her lap, Sophia nestled next to her father, and Arthur listened to the tales, pretending he was too grown up for fairy tales. This family lived in harmony and love. It seemed that nothing could shatter their idyll. But fate, as it often does, had already prepared its trials, which would soon burst into their world, turning everything upside down. One evening, after the children were already asleep and Michael was still working on his laptop, Anna entered the living room with her phone in hand. The evening was calm. Outside, the lights of neighboring houses twinkled, and soft music played from the kitchen speakers. Anna lingered in the doorway, glancing at her husband, who, absorbed in work, didn't notice her presence. In her hand, she held her phone, with a notification from a new social network glowing on the screen. Recently, her close friend Olivia had persistently urged her to sign up. "You simply must try it, Anna. It's so interesting. You can find old school friends, follow their lives, and there are so many inspiring pages." Anna, always skeptical of such things, initially dismissed it, but curiosity got the better of her. For the first few days she lazily scrolled through the feed. Photos, posts, quotes. It all seemed somewhat monotonous. But one night, as the house plunged into silence and the clock struck midnight, her attention was drawn to a new message. It was from a profile with a name that made her heart skip a beat. Brad Pitt. Anna reread the message several times, not believing her eyes. The avatar displayed the familiar face of the actor, the page filled with numerous photos from movie sets, autographs, and posts written in the first person. Anna initially distrusted unknown people on social networks, but this person's page seemed convincing. The avatar featured a photo of the famous actor, and the feed was full of publications, videos, and comments that looked authentic. He even sent video messages with personal words directed at her, which ultimately convinced Anna of his authenticity. The correspondence began with casual compliments. "You have a wonderful profile. You seem like an interesting person." Gradually, the conversation turned into trustful dialogues. The stranger shared his thoughts, spoke about how lonely it was to live in a world of luxury and fame. His stories were so sincere that Anna began to feel that he truly understood her. At first, she saw it as innocent chatting, but his manipulations made her believe she had become something important to him. "Are you really Brad Pitt?" she half-joked, barely holding back a smile. Her fingers froze above the screen for a moment, then she pressed send. The reply came almost instantly. "Yes, it's me. You're probably surprised that I'm writing to you, but I noticed your profile, and you seem very interesting to me." Anna felt her heart race. Was this a joke? Or maybe a mistake? Initially, she thought it was a prank, but her curiosity wouldn't let her leave the conversation unanswered. The stranger wrote warmly, sincerely, and his words sounded as if he had long been searching for someone to share his thoughts with. With each new message, their dialogue became increasingly intimate. He spoke of the challenges of working in Hollywood, shared funny stories from sets, and described how he often felt lonely in a world of luxury and fame. "You can't imagine how hard it is to be surrounded by people who only see the image, not the real person," he wrote one day. These words struck a chord with Emily, who often felt undervalued in her own life. A few days later, he started sending voice messages. His voice was soft, velvety, with a slight accent, just as she had always imagined the real Brad Pitt would sound. He spoke of how tired he was of the falseness of show business, how he dreamed of finding someone with whom he could be himself. Emily listened to these messages, sitting in her cozy armchair in the living room, and found herself overwhelmed with emotions. It was a strange but pleasant feeling. Someone finally heard her, understood her, appreciated her. Her days changed. Now she woke up thinking about how she could look forward to his message in the evening. She began seeking moments to be alone with her phone, checking every minute to see if he had written again. James noticed changes in her behavior. Emily became distracted, detached, but he didn't give it much thought at first. Conversations with the stranger were like a breath of fresh air for her. She told him about her worries, her children, and how she sometimes felt neglected. He listened, supported her, and told her she was an incredible woman. His words were like music, bringing back the colors she had lost in her life. One day, he admitted that he had health problems. He was in a hospital due to a rare illness, the treatment for which was long and arduous. He sent photos from the hospital room, where he lay on a bed with an 4-drip. Medical documents with official stamps looked so convincing that Emily had no doubts about their authenticity. She felt that she had to help him. After all, he wasn't just a pen pal to her. He had become a close friend, someone she trusted. The evening she sent him money for the first time remained etched in her memory. She sat before the screen for a long time, unsure whether she should do it, but his voice messages, filled with pain and gratitude, finally convinced her. "I'll pay back every cent," he said. Emily believed him, because she wanted to believe. Their communication became more frequent and personal. Emily, who used to find solace in her family duties, now eagerly awaited each new message from her virtual companion. In the evenings, when the house fell silent, she curled up in her favorite armchair with her phone in hand. The soft glow of the desk lamp illuminated her face, reflecting a range of emotions, from a light smile to deep anxiety. Each message became an escape from a reality where tensions were growing. The stranger, claiming to be a famous actor, knew how to choose words that touched the depths of her soul. His stories about life and the challenges he faced sounded so sincere that Emily couldn't help but believe him. Soon he shared that he was in a hospital. "I have a rare illness," he wrote. "Every day is a fight for my life. Sometimes I feel like giving up, but your words give me strength." These confessions resonated deeply in Emily's heart. She saw in him a person who was as lonely as she was. When he began sending photos from the hospital bed, his face gaunt from illness, a weak smile, IVs connected to his veins, her heart ached for him. Medical documents with official stamps appeared so authentic that she had no reason to doubt them. "I don't know why I'm telling you this, but I feel like you understand me like no one else," he said in one of his voice messages. His voice was filled with fatigue, but there was also a spark of hope. "Your kindness gives me the strength to fight." The stranger's words deeply moved Emily. She began worrying about him like he was someone close to her. Their correspondence became her solace, and he became someone who seemed to truly value, listen to, and understand her. Emily shared her thoughts, talked about her children, and admitted how she sometimes felt unappreciated in her own family. He listened attentively, supported her, and told her she was an amazing woman who deserved better. James noticed that Emily started to frequently isolate herself with her phone. She became less attentive to the children, skipped family dinners, and appeared distracted. In an attempt to understand what was happening, James tried to reconnect with her. He suggested they go away for the weekend or have a family dinner at her favorite restaurant. But Emily refused, coming up with various excuses. He shared his concerns with a friend, who advised him to seek help from a family therapist. James tried to organize a joint visit, but Emily rejected the idea, saying he was overthinking things. His frustration grew, but he didn't give up, trying to bring his wife back to the family. Meanwhile, her relationship with James was rapidly deteriorating. James, who once found comfort in her kindness and care, now saw a different woman before him. Emily was increasingly distracted, her thoughts clearly elsewhere. In the evenings, instead of their usual conversations, she immersed herself in her phone, hiding her correspondence from him. She avoided family dinners, citing fatigue. The changes in Emily's behavior didn't go unnoticed by the children. Ethan, the eldest, started spending more time with his younger siblings, feeling he had to take on some parental responsibilities. He helped Liam with his homework and put Sophie to bed when Emily was in her room with her phone. Sophie drew pictures reflecting her sadness. In one of them, there was a house with a family, but the mother's figure was far away in the corner of the paper. Liam started asking James more often why their mom no longer played with him. James tried to reassure the children, saying Emily was just tired, but he knew they sensed her detachment. One evening, James tried to talk to her. The house was already asleep, with only the clock ticking rhythmically in the silence. He sat across from her on the couch, his face expressing concern. "What's wrong, Emily? You've changed. It's like something is weighing on you. Why won't you tell me the truth?" he asked, his voice a mix of irritation and helplessness. Emily met his gaze briefly, then looked away. "You just don't understand," she said coldly, getting up from the couch. "I have my reasons. I'm tired of this life. You're always busy and I'm alone." These words hit James like a blow. Emily, who had always seemed like his rock and confidant, now felt 1,000 miles away. He sat in the living room for a long time, staring into the void, feeling their once strong bond crumble. Emily, meanwhile, was in the bedroom, crying as she held her phone to her chest. She knew she was destroying her family, but she couldn't stop. The stranger had become her comfort, her escape from a reality where she felt unnecessary. He told her she deserved love and happiness, that no one should live in constant self-sacrifice. The next day, she dove even deeper into their correspondence. Every message from him was filled with support and understanding. "You're unique," he wrote. "I've never met anyone who could care so deeply for others." These words played like music in Emily's head. She closed her eyes and imagined his arms around her, his admiring gaze. She began to believe that this man truly understood her better than anyone else. Meanwhile, her children increasingly felt her absence. One day, Sophie asked, "Mommy, why don't you read us bedtime stories anymore?" Liam added, "Mom, will you play with me soon?" Emily simply waved them off, promising to do it later. Her world was becoming more confined to the screen of her phone, while her family faded into the background. This growing rift was becoming wider, threatening to consume them all. James, unable to find another way, sought help from close friends to understand how to bring his wife back. But every effort he made was met with her cold detachment, and Emily continued to retreat into the world that seemed like her salvation. The stranger asked for help. His messages became increasingly urgent and emotional. "Emily, I don't know what to do. My doctors say I urgently need surgery or I might not survive," he wrote in one of his late-night messages. "I've spent all my savings on treatment. You're my only hope." These words made Emily stare at her phone for a long time, unsure how to respond. She felt responsible for this man who seemed so close, as if they had known each other forever. At that moment, her mind and heart were at odds. One part of her understood that the situation was strange, while the other genuinely cared and wanted to help. The first transfer was small. Emily spent a long time thinking about the amount, convincing herself it was just helping a friend. She looked at the bank notification confirming the transfer, feeling both relief and anxiety. But soon he wrote again, "Emily, this isn't enough. The doctors say additional procedures are needed. I'll repay you every penny, just please don't leave me now." Each of his messages sounded increasingly desperate, and Emily, already immersed in this illusion of closeness, couldn't refuse. The transfers grew larger. She began taking money from the family budget, hoping James wouldn't notice. "He never asks where the money goes anyway," she thought, each time trying to silence her conscience. James didn't immediately notice the changes in the family budget. He was busy with work, handling important matters. But one evening, while reviewing financial statements, he noticed significant withdrawals from their joint account. His face turned pale and his heart filled with dread. "Emily, what is this?" he asked during dinner, holding a printout of the bank statement. His voice was cold and sharp. Emily, unprepared for the question, froze for a moment. Her face turned crimson as she lowered her gaze to her plate. "It's personal expenses," she said quietly, avoiding his gaze. "Personal expenses? For this amount?" James's voice rose, barely concealing his anger. "Emily, this is our family budget. Do you realize you're putting us at risk?" She abruptly stood up from the table, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You never listen to me, James. Never. All you care about is work, and what about me? I've always been second place." Her voice trembled and her eyes filled with tears. "What are you talking about? We're a family. I work for us, for the kids." James tried to understand what was happening, but her words cut like a knife. Emily suddenly shouted, "I found someone who values me," and left him stunned, retreating to the bedroom and slamming the door. Those words were the breaking point. James, shattered, realized he could no longer fight for their marriage alone. The next morning, as the house still slept, he sat at the kitchen table with a mug of cold coffee, thinking about how everything had gone so wrong. It felt like the woman he once loved was no longer there. She was consumed by something he couldn't bring back. A few days later, James had an honest conversation with Emily about divorce. Their discussion was cold and detached. To James's surprise, Emily didn't resist. She even insisted that the children stay with him. "I don't want them to see me falling apart," she said, trying to sound firm, but her voice trembled. "You can give them more than I can." James was stunned by her words. At that moment, he realized how deeply she was entangled in her thoughts and feelings. He saw that the woman he had loved was lost, replaced by someone unrecognizable. After the divorce, James took full responsibility for the children. He tried to maintain a sense of normalcy for them, but Emily's absence was glaringly obvious. In the evenings after the children went to bed, he often stayed in the living room, staring at the empty side of the couch where she used to sit. It was hard for him to come to terms with the fact that their family was broken. Emily, meanwhile, immersed herself in her new life. She continued her correspondence with the stranger, drifting further away from reality. But instead of the happiness she sought, her life began to feel empty. Each day she woke up with a growing sense of guilt. Her new life was nothing like she had imagined. After signing the divorce papers, James was left alone in the empty house that had once been filled with laughter and warmth. His life changed in an instant. On the first evening after Emily left, James sat at the edge of the couch, holding a family photo taken years ago. In it, Emily looked at him with love. The children laughed as they hugged their parents. Now that photo felt foreign, as if it belonged to another world he could no longer return to. Every night, after the children fell asleep, James was left alone with his thoughts. He tried to find answers to the questions tormenting him. Where did I go wrong? Why couldn't I keep our family together? It was difficult for him to admit that he too had made mistakes, spending too much time at work, not talking to Emily enough about her feelings. Guilt, anger, and helplessness mixed within him, making each day a struggle. Dealing with the children was even harder. Ethan, the eldest son, tried to be strong and help James with the younger ones, but even he couldn't hide his pain. One night, James heard Ethan crying in his room. Knocking gently, he entered and saw the boy sitting on his bed, clutching a stuffed bear, a gift from Emily. "Dad, why did Mom leave?" Ethan asked, his voice trembling. "Did I do something wrong?" James sat beside him, wrapping an arm around his shoulders, feeling a lump form in his throat. "No, son, it's not because of you. This is adult stuff. Sometimes it happens, but I promise we'll get through it. I'll always be here for you." The words sounded convincing, but James knew how hard it would be to keep his promise. Sophie, the middle child, withdrew into herself. She drew less, and her smiles became rare. One day, James found a drawing on her desk. A house, swings in the garden, her and her brothers, but no parents. "Sophie, why aren't Mom and I in the drawing?" he asked gently. The girl, without lifting her eyes, replied, "Because we'll never be together again." Her words cut through James. He realized the children were experiencing the divorce more intensely than he had imagined. They felt the fracture in their family deeply, expressing it through their fears and doubts. Young Liam asked questions that broke James's heart. "Dad, is Mom coming back? Does she love us?" Each time, James found the words to comfort his son, but he remained shattered. He often woke up at night, recalling how Emily used to play with Liam, how Sophie laughed when her mom praised her drawings, how Ethan was always proud when she attended his school events. Now these memories were painfully vivid. Meanwhile, the scammer, hiding behind Brad Pitt's persona, continued to drain money from Emily. His messages became less frequent, but each one was filled with desperation and pleas for help. "Emily, I don't know who else to turn to. You're my only hope. Please help me," he wrote. These words tore at her heart, and on the brink of her own despair, she continued to send him money. But one day, everything changed. Emily sent another transfer, expecting the usual gratitude, but no response came. A day passed, then two. She wrote to him again, but her messages went unread. His profile on the social network disappeared, and the phone numbers she had used to contact him were blocked. Emily's heart sank. She tried again and again to reach him, but it was futile. The silence was deafening. Her mind refused to accept the truth, but the facts were clear. The person she had given everything to was a fraud. Her friend had vanished, taking not only her money, but also her faith in people. Emily sat on the floor of her empty apartment. The rooms, once filled with light and joy, now felt cold and hollow. Her hands trembled as her phone lay beside her, a silent witness to her pain. Thoughts swirled in her head. How could I have been so naive? How could I have destroyed everything I had? Soon after, Emily went to the police. The officers listened to her story, recorded her statement, and examined the documents and messages she provided. Emily sat in the stuffy office, trying to hold back tears as the officer on duty grimly flipped through the pages of her records. She saw the familiar expression of weariness on his face. Clearly, this wasn't his first case of this kind. Ms. Emily, we understand your situation, the officer began, setting the papers aside. His voice was steady, almost cold, as if reciting rehearsed lines. Unfortunately, these kinds of scams are very common. These people operate from overseas or through complex VPN networks, making them nearly impossible to track. Emily's hands began to shake. She still hoped to hear even the slightest assurance that they would catch the scammer. But you have his photos, voice messages, bank transfers. Isn't that enough? Emily's voice was almost pleading. Most of the data you provided is likely fake, the officer replied calmly. Scammers use fake profiles, voice-altering software, and transfer money through such intricate chains that tracking them is nearly impossible. So you won't even try? Emily struggled to hold back tears. Her voice grew louder, filled with frustration. The officer sighed heavily and spread his hands, as if to justify himself. We will, of course, send inquiries to the bank and try to trace the money's route. But let's be realistic. Such cases rarely end in success. They use foreign payment systems and dummy accounts. Even if we manage to track the funds, recovering them is almost impossible. But it's your job. You're supposed to protect us, she exclaimed, feeling her patience running out. Miss Emily, please understand. The officer finally met her gaze, his eyes a mix of sympathy and irritation. That doesn't mean we won't work on your case. But our resources are limited. These schemes have been refined over years, and your transfers likely went to an account that has already been closed. So that's it? It just ends here. Emily felt small and powerless against a system that seemed to have turned its back on her. We'll do what we can, he repeated, his words offering little comfort. But I advise you not to set high expectations. The officer's final words broke Emily completely. She left the police station feeling her legs turn to jelly. The sun was already setting, but its warm rays felt cold to her. All that remained in her heart was emptiness and a sense of betrayal. Not only by the scammer but also by the system she had trusted. This truth, like a cold shower, broke her from within. Emily had lost everything. Her family, her money, and most importantly, her faith in herself. She could no longer look in the mirror. Her reflection had become a stranger. She saw an uncertain, broken woman, a shadow of her former self, created by her own choices. One morning, unable to bear the weight of her condition, Emily lost consciousness. Her neighbors, noticing she hadn't left her apartment, called an ambulance. She woke up in a hospital room. White walls, the smell of antiseptic, the steady hum of medical equipment. Everything felt distant and unreal. Doctors diagnosed her with a nervous breakdown. Her body had succumbed to the stress of recent months. Emily lay motionless, staring at the ceiling. Voices of her children, James's laughter, and memories of happier days she had destroyed replayed in her mind. How did I let this happen? She whispered, barely holding back tears. Her memories became her punishment. She saw the faces of her children, their smiles, their hopeful eyes. She recalled how Sophie asked her to read a bedtime story, how Liam invited her to play, and how Ethan sought her advice. All of it was in the past. The doctor suggested she see a psychologist. The first sessions were difficult. Emily couldn't speak about her pain, but tears flowed freely down her cheeks. She had to re-examine her life, step by step, recalling how she made the mistake of trusting a stranger. Every time the psychologist asked her about her family, her heart filled with pain. You can still change your life, the doctor told her one day. But to do so, you need to forgive yourself and take the first step. These words touched something deep within her. Emily understood that she couldn't change the past, but she had a chance to build a new future. After being discharged from the hospital, Emily felt weak but determined. She began writing letters to James and the children. Each letter was filled with pain and apologies. She begged for their forgiveness, explaining how deeply she regretted her actions. James didn't respond for a long time. He was too hurt and disappointed. But one day, as he read her letter, he noticed a sincerity in Emily's words that hadn't been there before. He realized that she had truly changed. "Mom wrote to me," Ethan said one evening. "She's apologizing." James sighed heavily. He didn't know what to tell the children. He saw how much they missed their mother but feared that her return might disrupt their fragile peace. Emily continued writing, expecting nothing in return. For her, it became a way to express her feelings and show her children that she still loved them. She knew redemption would take time, and she was willing to wait as long as it took. Months passed since Emily left the hospital. Her life no longer resembled the one she had before. The cozy home, children's laughter, and family evenings were all in the past. Now her days were filled with silence, reflection, and attempts to find some stability. Her small, modest apartment became a place for introspection. On the wall hung a single photograph of the children, Ethan, Sophie, and Liam. Each time Emily looked at their faces, her heart ached. Emily began her journey of redemption with the simplest steps. The first thing she did was get a job. She found work at a small bookstore on the corner, where the air always smelled of coffee and old books. The owner, an elderly woman named Elizabeth, was kind and understanding. She didn't ask unnecessary questions but always smiled at Emily as if to say, "You'll be okay." Working at the bookstore became therapeutic for Emily. Every day she organized shelves, sorted new arrivals, and helped the rare visitors find the right book. She began finding solace in the quiet, the soft rustle of pages, and the aroma of tea she and Elizabeth brewed during lunch. One day, while sorting old books, Emily came across a children's story she used to read to Sophie and Liam. Her hands trembled as she turned the pages, vivid memories of evenings spent reading to them flooding her mind. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but she didn't try to stop them. They were tears of cleansing. Emily continued writing letters to James and the children. Her letters were filled with love, apologies, and memories. She wrote about how much she missed them, how she dreamed of seeing their faces and hearing their voices. In each letter, she asked for forgiveness, knowing it might never be enough. "Dad, did you read Mom's letter?" Sophie asked one day. She held a piece of paper covered in Emily's neat handwriting. James looked at his daughter. He saw the tears glistening in her eyes. He had read those letters himself but was afraid to show the children that he still couldn't forgive Emily. It pained him to see how much they missed her, but he didn't want them to experience disappointment again. "Sophie, your mom is trying," he finally said. "But we need time to see if she's really changed." Emily didn't expect a response to her letters but kept writing. Every evening she sat at her desk, pen in hand, and poured her heart out. She wrote about her job, the people she met, the books she read. These letters were her only connection to her family, her only hope. One rainy evening, the bookstore door opened and Ethan walked in. Emily looked up and her heart stopped. He had grown taller, his face more serious, but she immediately recognized her son. "Hi, Mom," he said softly, stepping closer. Emily couldn't hold back her tears. She wanted to hug him but was afraid he might push her away. But Ethan made the first move. He hugged her tightly, the kind of hug reserved for those who had been missed for a long time. "Dad, let me come," he said. "He said you're trying." These words were like a ray of light in the darkness for Emily. They talked for a long time. Ethan told her about school, his brother and sister, and James. Emily listened, memorizing every word, as if afraid to miss something important. After that visit, Emily found hope. She started writing letters more often, sending small gifts to the children, books, toys, and handmade items. James, seeing her efforts, began to soften toward her attempts to reconnect with the children. Reconciliation was a long and arduous process. James still kept his distance, but the children began talking about their mother more often. Sophie drew pictures for her, and Liam asked when they would see her again. Emily understood she couldn't rush things. Her goal wasn't to bring back the past but to earn their trust. She started seeing a therapist and working on herself. Each session was a step toward understanding her mistakes, and learning the importance of being honest with herself and her loved ones. Emily knew she had a long road ahead, but for the first time in a long while, she felt capable of walking it. This journey became not just a lesson for Emily, but also a new chapter in her life. She was no longer the woman who had torn her family apart. She had grown stronger, wiser, and more capable of change. Her children, her family, became her purpose and her inspiration. And though the path to their forgiveness was long and arduous, she knew it was worth every effort. Subscribe to the channel and hit the like button so you don't miss more heartwarming stories.